to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
Good to see everyone.
It's been a while.
Good.
A while.
It's been a while.
Since I heard.
Usually Alex is singing. It's a new era
It's
now.
a new era.
Here we go.
It is a new
Start
era.
joining the singing crew. It has been a long time. Usually we take a little summer hiatus.
We do.
I feel like this one was maybe we stretched it a little bit longer
It's
than
true.
normal.
There's a few reasons for that.
Yeah, a lot going on, you know?
Lots.
If you haven't downloaded the CCC app, maybe you're listening to this episode on the CCC app.
Yeah.
Welcome.
But that was one thing that I know Alex and I had been working on, and that's taken some time.
Yeah, we have not launched one since, so that little portion of it's just been static since we launched the app. So
Yeah.
it'll be fun to see something new there.
Yes. Yeah, download that. It's wherever you download your apps. Fine apps are found. Not Applebee's or Chili's, not
Yeah.
those types of apps. But
This one's free, always.
how's everybody doing? Holding in there? Hanging in there?
Doing good. Mm-hmm. It was a busy summer. I feel like we did lots of traveling,
Yeah.
wedding. Lots of people got married
That
out of
happens.
state this year, so we were traveling. But
Destination weddings.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but good
What
times.
was the best one?
What'd you say?
What was the best
The
wedding?
best
that you
one
went
was
to?
my little sister got married this
Okay.
summer. So our
Congrats.
longtime listeners remember, I think I've mentioned Brian and Tad before, but they're married. They got
They
married in
did
St.
it.
Louis.
Yeah, I thought they were gonna have the whole crew come down and maybe
Oh yeah, right. DJ.
DJ, but they
we definitely
didn't.
could have
that would
DJ'd
have
that.
been fun.
That
The
would've been
three of
good.
us.
Yeah. Next time. Well, no, hopefully there's not next time. Sorry.
Good point.
No. What'd you guys do this summer?
I went
It's a
to
highlight.
Eric's homeland, Rapid City area.
Yeah, he
the
went to my
Black
stuff.
Hills.
And then he preached a whole
Together?
sermon on why wall drug was
Oh.
bad.
I did not say it was bad.
I know.
It was not
When
my
you were preaching, I was like, I
destination.
wonder what Eric thinks of us thinking about
just
that.
I just
wasn't my
love teasing him.
destination.
I thought the sermon was great. I actually did really enjoy it. I thought it was
you.
I did too.
poignant, but I just, I had to defend my
Wall drug.
stomping ground.
You and a few other people were in my inbox.
Were they?
There's some wall drug apologists. I did learn that this summer. But yeah, it's a good summer. Forrest Frank broke his back and got healed. That's wild. And Eric saw him.
I did. I
You
went
saw
to
him
this,
the day, a couple
I
days
went-
after, right?
Well, not a couple days.
His
After the healing,
miraculous
though.
healing.
Yeah. Oh, after the healing. Yes. I saw the first performance of Lemonade at the State Fair.
With the figs. I saw that.
Yeah, they popped out on
Wow.
stage. That was cool. Yeah, I didn't. That was kind of an unexpected detour for me. My daughter and her boyfriend were going to that concert, and we were at the State Fair with my wife and son, and we were. It was getting later in the day, and my son Dexter was like watching Lecrae through the fence, and he seemed very intrigued. And I was like, what do you want? You want to go look around, find some fried candy bars or something? And he's like, oh, I'm okay. And I could tell he was kind of into it. So I went to the box office. Everywhere said it was sold out, but this sweet old lady back there said, no, we got standing room for $30. It's like, okay,
Doing it.
so
Did it.
So, Eric, would you say that was the highlight of your summer break?
the State Fair was like kind of probably the biggest thing we did this summer. It was a pretty at home one. Anyways, it was a pretty calm summer, uneventful. So yeah, but when the first time at the Iowa State Fair, it's
How many stars?
I don't want
out of
people
5?
in my inbox for my
Yeah,
review
true.
of the State Fair.
Okay.
But I will say it is a State Fair. I maybe hyped it up a little too much over just hearing what it was. I mean, if you like eating fried food, there's a thing.
Go.
Check
Okay.
box that's there.
Animals, I'm sure.
There's a lot of hogs and pigs and various pork creatures.
How many different ways could you say
Yeah.
swine?
And then, there's rides and all the trappings of what you would expect of like a carnival, but it was fine. It was good. So,
but now we're back.
but we're
we
back
are.
here.
Talking about something else that launched this summer.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of I almost want to say maybe if people haven't watched this, do we tell them to press pause and go watch it and then come back? Or do we just see if they want to watch it after I don't know. It's like a weird endorsement of something where we're not really endorsing it, I guess
Yeah.
is what I'm trying. I'll get to the point. Shiny Happy People season 2, A Teenage Holy War. It's streaming on Amazon Prime. This is a documentary series that they covered the Duggars in season 1. And this was a lot about Ron Luce and Acquire the Fire, Teen Mania, all of that sort of
and
thing.
very doable if people did want to pause and watch because it's 3 episodes.
Yeah, it's not a long commitment.
Series.
Well, it seems it's in the bullseye of culture and Christianity. So someone sent me I hadn't even heard about it, and someone sent me the trailer and was like, you guys got to talk about this. And that was like in June before it even came out. And I was like, well, we will eventually. So I sent that to you guys. Let's watch this and talk about it. So here we are.
So that's what we did. Maybe that you can, maybe after listening to this, you can decide if you haven't already watched it, if it's something you want to watch. Because I think really what we're going to be doing today is kind of talking about what it covered and some of our maybe personal experiences of growing up around that time, and also our takeaways from this documentary. Did I set that up well, Alex? Do you have anything you want to add to it? Okay.
I think.
All right. So Shiny Happy People, season 2. It covers a lot of ground. I mean, it kind of focuses on a handful of the same people that it's interviewing throughout. One Ray Boltz, his 2 children are featured in it. I think Joshua Harris from the book I Kissed Dating Goodbye is featured in it. And then just several, I don't remember all their names, so I'm not even going to try to name everybody, but it kind of goes back and forth between their stories while covering this era of Acquire the Fire. Ron Luce is the person who led that, who kind of pioneered it. And he was a very divisive individual, I think, in Christian media, but really rallied a lot of people behind him and what he believed. Do you guys remember that era? How were you connected to it?
I remember we had so I grew up and my dad was a youth pastor part-time and then worked at a store with his parents, an electronics store. And so I remember, I grew up in an AG church. I remember watching not Acquire the Fire. Ron Luce had a
Teen Mania?
No, Fire by Night.
Fire by Night, yeah.
Fire by Night. So those VHSs, and it was just this, and how the show kind of describes it and how I would remember it is it was just this reaction to MTV in a way, like a Christian kind of war on culture, but trying to bring in some of okay, this is how the world or whatever secular culture is winning teens, but we need to rise up against this. And so I kind of had that grungy look to it that hey, you should be a part of it. This just movement and momentum. So I remember that from a young age. And then I think I went to 2 Acquire the Fires, definitely one in Kansas City. I remember first, I was in middle school. So our whole youth group, I was a part of a smaller youth group. So we all went, middle schoolers, high schoolers. I remember it was one of the first times I stayed in a big hotel, and I don't know why I remember that part. That was cool.
Yeah.
First time.
It's a big deal when you're a kid and you haven't done that.
But it was for me, one of those first experiences with thousands of teenagers, all worshiping Jesus. So our student ministry, they have something like Life, or there's these other conferences that are out there right now where, you've got your youth group, but all the youth groups, it seems come together, or at least in a region. And I just remember being blown away by thousand, you just connected in that kind of way. So I remember that and being, just kind of blown away by it. I don't really remember a ton of the details. I couldn't tell you who spoke, how good the worship was, anything like that. But just kind of that first sense of, wow, this is cool. I'm a part of something way bigger than my small church youth ministry.
What was your connection, Jess?
Did they used to have, I remember those things, but they had VHS series that we would watch every week. So for me,
that's what it was.
When I was watching
Fire by Night was,
I just remember the Acquire the Fire stuff being on VHS, and we would do it every week. So it just felt so long.
Yeah.
So being raised in that purity culture, even just the obedience or the spiritual war of letting things go was something that I felt I experienced it every week. Mm-hmm. And even just somebody said in the beginning of the episodes that they believed that their Christianity would end up in them some way giving something up or being a martyr. And I really identified with that because I do feel especially when you're putting yourself through it every week and showing up.
Yeah.
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 Has an impact.
they've Ron Luce really focused a lot on creating a countercultural experience, and I can't help but like watching it, I couldn't help but think of where we're at today and how you're starting to see some Christian influencers really kind of use some of this language again, because it's like you gotta go against the culture, and you gotta. It just doesn't feel like what. I guess it's history repeats itself is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't. I feel like we're getting closer and closer to the next Ron Luce kind of rising up and doing something not too dissimilar from this, because I think people are feeling that culture war stuff again, and you're seeing a rise in younger generations getting more involved in church. You've kind of seen this bigger acceptance from kind of that like bro culture going to church. I mean, even things like Ninja, the video game streamer, is now talking about his faith for the first time on streams, and how he's become a Christian, and he's going to. So you're seeing this like cultural shift where people want to speak out against what they feel is kind of like threatening them. But yeah, the whole idea though was creating. Alex, you're wearing the Lord's Army shirt today.
Yes, sir.
It was,
I'm in the Lord's Army. Yes, sir.
But it was about creating an army of God, and it talks about in Ron's early life how he had an experience at a church or some sort of an event maybe where Jesus was represented to him differently than he had ever heard before, and it was like he's like, oh, Jesus was tough. Like Jesus wasn't the soft guy. Like he was tough, and he was a fighter, and he was a warrior, and he kind of made that his whole identity from there.
Which seemed like, and obviously you don't get to hear from Ron. He rejected being on it, and there's a statement you can read on that. But they try to tell a little bit of his narrative. I think in the first episode, where they kind of share, hey, he came from a pretty broken, jacked up life. And so I can see, and even in doing student ministry for a long time, this is an overgeneralized statement, but there seems to be, this attractive thing when you've been through abuse and you've been through pretty painful things, rejection, that a Jesus that is macho or like has your back, will fight with and for you, is an attractive Jesus to somebody that maybe feels helpless, or they feel like, I'm passive, I'm weak, I've been told I'm weak, like this manly, Rambo type of Jesus. I can see how it was attractive. And so I feel like they tried to highlight in some ways what drew that out of him. But I grew up I was just singing that song as kind of a joke, like I'm in the Lord's Army, but it seemed like me growing up was it. Like this culture war, MTV era and all that kind of stuff. Here's what you can and can't watch. We really drew a lot of lines in the sand of us versus them. We've talked about Harry Potter. There were so many of those things that was there's culture, and then there's like the army of God. And the army of God's job is to rise up, to be bold. Like I remember, our youth ministry, Youth Explosion, that was our cool name. And like I think Ezekiel 37 was the passage of this army of dry bones and God breathing life into it. And so there was just such, at least in the circle I grew up in, this war, this all-out war on, there's culture, there's secular, and then there's the Christians, the real Christians, the holy Christians, the ones that, and our job is to rise up and fight against it. And so that was just very much, pervasive in just the culture I grew up in. Even you
saying that though, you hear that, right? Like now, the echoes of that. I just feel like we're entering. I don't know. We don't need to harp on that, but I just find it interesting that this documentary comes out now, because I do think we're in that era again. I think you see these people who are fighting for culture on social media and things like that didn't exist before. One of the journalists that was in the documentary was Jeff Charlotte, who said that he described it as a fascism in front of me on a massive scale. And I don't know. The whole documentary, I just kind of kept ping-ponging between the extremes that I would hear from one side or another, and people's takes on
The
it.
extremes within the documentary.
Yeah,
Okay.
just like, people calling it fascism versus calling it a holy war versus, I don't know. It just seemed like both sides got a little extreme. Like, I mean, but anyways, we'll get there. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. What's your take on that? Did you agree with the idea that it was a fascist organization or culture or that they were building, or do you feel like that statement was a little bit extreme?
I mean, to me, it's a lot of it seemed extreme because most of the people that were on there, I don't think there was one person on there that like had a positive experience with the ministry at the end of the day. And so it's difficult. And I think anybody that watches documentaries, you have to watch it with some kind of awareness that there's an agenda. And I'm not like saying there's this hidden agenda, being a conspiracy theorist on it, but you just have to watch anything with an open mind that, hey, one side's usually being represented. There's edits, there's all that kind of stuff. And so just have to watch it with that kind of an open mind. But, fascism, that's just a hard
I think it's
thing
based,
to equate.
right? Isn't it based on kind of the lens you're looking at it through? Because in hindsight, looking back, maybe we would call it more fascist. But then in the moment, if you were to be accusing those people of that, they would say, no, that's not it. Like, this is our agenda and this is why, and this is what we're doing and this is where we're called. And so I think with that, we kind of, I had to give some empathy to that because, and really even look back at like my parents parenting me through that of like, okay, were they really trying to do damage? Like, were they saying yes to things that maybe they should have said no to? And so I think that when we call something fascist, even especially something that was like a couple decades ago that still affects us today in our culture, it's like, maybe it was. Like, I don't want to say it's not because I think that there's pieces of it that definitely like smell like that, but did they mean it that way? I don't know. If I'm thinking the best about people and they said no, I'd want to believe them, but it just...
Yeah.
And I think the difficult part is media is always at the center of, what the next culture is trying to figure out. And it's at the crossroads of what is good and what is evil. So at that time, it was MTV, it was rappers, it was all this kind of culture. And now for us, we're like, okay, it's cell phones, it's video games, it's the internet, And so every generation has that. But the parents that are trying to parent through it, they had no clue. They are immigrants trying to parent natives in this new found kind of freedom and whatever. And so,
Yeah, and I agree with you on that to a certain extent. But man, I feel like we give a lot of
grace.
Grace to that. Just because I'm thinking the way I parent, not that way.
yeah.
I mean, I'm maybe not a native to digital.
Yeah.
But it's like I'm so invested in knowing what's going on there because I choose to be.
Yeah. And that's a huge thing.
And so we give these parents all this grace
Yeah.
to go, oh, well, yeah, you just don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I get it. You don't know how to parent your kid. And it's like we're all living in the same century.
Yeah.
You're not that far removed from technology. You choose to be uninterested or disinvolved. You know what I mean? That's
you're right,
the
Eric.
stuff
It is a choice. Like, if my kids are involved in something, like how much am I looking at what they're doing? Whether that's technology, whether that's what's getting talked about at school or at youth group, you're right. I mean, that to me hasn't changed.
But people use that as kind of a safety net. Oh, I don't get the phone. I don't understand social media.
you know
And it's
what?
like, well, yeah, you might not, but make an effort to.
Right. But maybe that's a way I make myself feel better.
Right, it is 100%.
You know what I mean? Where it's
100%,
like,
yeah.
hey, they were doing this for the first time too. And like that maybe like removes some hurt from me or some blame that I would place places because... So I can say that maybe that's part of my heart in saying that too. It makes me feel better.
Yeah, I think you're right. I just think that there's sometimes we give this blanket covering of like, well, yeah, the kids are so much smarter than the parents on this thing. But yet then you've got generations who like don't even know how to like fix their computer because they've only grown up on a phone.
Yeah.
So then they've got the generations in both. So it's blanket statements like that where I'm like, I think sometimes we say that stuff in an effort to protect people where there just needs to be more accountability. But I think it plays into this too, because these parents, it's a whole culture thing, right? Because this was the time when things like DC Talk, Carmen, all these all these Christian musicians and stuff are trying to mirror secular culture.
Exactly.
And so, and the parents were okay with that because it's like, well, they're singing about Jesus, right?
Yeah.
So it's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it wasn't or isn't. It's just very, I don't know. I don't know how you can't pick this stuff apart without diving into the nuance of all of it.
And there's always been, a sub-Christian culture that has tried to push in it in some kind of way. I mean, and I think probably in every culture, there's like people that, I talked about him earlier, like a Forrest Frank, right? That are Christians that are kind of ascending into the world or the secular quote unquote culture. And like we get excited as Christians about it, or we've talked about Kanye West and Justin Bieber and the evolutions of that when celebrities get excited about it. But it seems like there's times where especially we'll give an endorsement or something's fine based on a person's endorsement. So one of the things they focused on a lot was focus on the family, right? And so focus on the family in the 90s especially, and James Dobson was this real larger than life person, and this is how you should raise your family. And just the information that was out there or where to get this information was just different. It's differently, you heard it from your church and you heard it from, whatever your Christian radio station was at the time that were playing Focus on the Family and Adventures to Odyssey. But there was always this Christian version of whatever's cool in culture. We have our Christian version of it. And we still have that in some ways today. Yeah. But it does seem like people are more open to like, I don't know, being a part of not just creating a sub-Christian culture, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
So kind of the narrative of where this takes us, or at least the show does, it opens with kind of that fire by night mentality. And then Romulus started holding these rallies, selling out stadiums, which was Acquire the Fire. And then from there started building in Teen Mania this sort of 1 year experience where people would, go kind of like a gap year.
Yeah.
Mostly out of high school. And so they would call people, they would have these rallies, and then they would call people to either these mission trips for a year or to come be a part of this organization down in Texas, Teen Mania, where they would come and live and be interns at this place, and then they would get to travel and help put on these shows. Some of them would. Some of them would just be on the phones calling others to be a part of this organization. So
what was his name? Ray Bolt's son. He was saying something like he was a telemarketer for Jesus.
Yeah.
That's
so they would call. They would follow up with all the people that would make these decisions at this. I want to give my life to Jesus, and then they would call. Hey, you put your number in there and you need to come be a part of it. And so that's where a lot of what begins to happen and what they talk about, really the negative experiences that start to come to life happen in like more of this setting where there's people going to be a part of this leadership academy with Teen Mania, and then they get a part of what they called the ESOL, which was the emotionally stretching opportunity of a lifetime. So being a part of this program, it was a year program. So you'd sign up, you'd be a part of it. You'd have to raise your own funds to be a part of it. And one weekend of the year, as you would get there, they would have this thing that you could opt into. If you wanted to, from listening to, I've been trying to do a little research, listen to other people, you could opt into being a part of this ESOL. But it felt like if you didn't do that, I mean, you could say no, but if you didn't do that, you weren't really committed.
People would notice.
You were a part of this crew, and so this ESOL stood for emotionally stretching opportunity of a lifetime, where they would do all these military like disciplines. They would take you out for the weekend and literally put you in military garb and run you ragged.
It's like a boot camp.
Yeah,
essentially.
Very much,
and
not
maybe
just
even like worse than boot camp. I mean, they even showed some of the things like you're covered in cockroaches and you're forced into
eating nasty foods,
right.
like Fear Factor kind of stuff, and
claustrophobic spaces.
All the while they're like yelling at you, and
And one of the fascinating things they talked about too was they would just go take you somewhere, because it was in Texas, and they would just drop you off with a cross. And like they said, you had like 48 hours
to get back.
But you had to carry the cross.
But you had to carry the cross. And it was just...
There was one of the stories that stood out to me was when they said that a cop helped some of them get a ride back, and one of the girls just started sobbing because he wouldn't take the cross in the car, and they ended up putting the car on the cross on the roof of the car just to get it back.
And so these people talked a lot about just that time and, the emotional damage that did, how really they were told by, Ron and Dave Haas, the other guy that really ran the institution, don't listen to your emotions. Don't, you got to ignore that. You've got to continue to serve God outside of, you're going to be weak. You're, where the flesh is willing, but the spirit is weak, like all those kinds of tropes that sometimes we use out of context in scripture. And so they really tried to beat them down, and that as a spiritual discipline almost.
And let's also that is spiritual abuse. That's a word that they use there that I think is really fitting is trauma. That's where trauma starts, especially when we are so confused by, okay, we're doing this for Jesus, somebody in authority, I'm signed up to do this, I said yes to this, and I'm experiencing this as a result of that, can cause trauma and trauma with faith.
Yeah. Okay, so
and I think we saw that a lot in this, I think everyone had some kind of spiritual trauma that they had experienced.
For sure.
Everyone interviewed in there for sure.
And then one of the other things they mentioned was the missions trips that they went on. Phil Bolts, that's the name of Ray's son.
Phil.
He had mentioned that he was on one of the missions trips in India when he had a medical emergency. I think it was in appendicitis or something like that. And then he had a very, very, let's say, third world country experience with the way that operation took place. He got infected. I think his parents were called when he got flown back to the States saying, you need to show up with an ambulance.
And that's because a leader kind of told them to.
Yeah.
They were told not to, and they kind of went above that authority and no, he's going to die.
Yeah. And so, it does... they start to call into question a lot of different things, whether that's what were they actually doing over there? Were they actually being helpful as missionaries, or were they, I don't know. I don't know how you answer some of that stuff, but were they prepared they weren't prepared for any type of medical emergency or anything like that.
Well, I think one of the things they talked about, and we talk about it here, even in our denomination, is, we say in the Christian Missionary Alliance, we're an end times movement. And one of our goals is to going to the hardest to reach places. And part of that is a belief that we help usher in the return of Jesus, because scripture says, that when the gospel has gone out to all nations, that's when Christ is going to return. And so we take that mantle on ourselves. And they talked a lot about that being the pressure point for a lot of people of you are God. And when you believe that you're special, and when you believe you've got a mandate given to you by God, and when you believe you're going somewhere to change the world, that's a powerful fuel, especially for an 18-year-old that's I don't know what to do with my life. And they really wanted you to know hey, college is cool, all that. But these are 18-year-olds that are man, when you're told you're making a difference that stretches into eternity, a difference that changes people's lives forever, that's powerful. And I think that's one of the things that the church, how we use that, because I think it's true. And yet how we cast that narrative and to whom we cast that narrative, man, that's where it can become a pretty slippery slope quickly.
Well, and then you couple it with they were having people practice lying and having people practice the ways that they're going to sell themselves at the border to get through and all these things. And to me, it's even okay, if you have an adolescent that you're saying okay, there are cases like this that we lie and we deceive and that's okay. How confusing is that? Because then now I'm going to take that back and I'm going to question okay, well, if it's for Jesus or if it's in a spiritual context, what's okay, what's not okay.
Yeah. And
there's a lot of gray area that's created when it's we're asking these kids to do that. It's okay, well, that turns into very confused adult, right? If I have that like laid as my ideals and Christian leaders are instructing me to do that.
Yeah.
I remember when I was the middle school pastor, we went on a mission trip one time, and it was the first time I had gone to this location, and they sent us out on a prayer walk, and, you know, and it's 7th and 8th graders. They sent us out on a prayer walk in Chicago, and, you know, tell us, just go out there, you know, pray for people. And they just kind of send you out with that. And, you know, you go out for an hour, and then we came back into the space, and the guy that was leading the experience is like, what did you see? So everyone's naming things they saw. I saw, hey, bakery. I saw homeless person. I saw, you know, this flag or these businesses, these homes. And then he's like, none of you guys answered. None of you guys saw the spiritual death. And then he plays this scene from Saving Private Ryan.
Oh.
And like, I didn't know any of this was going to happen. So then there's this gory scene. I mean, a rated R movie.
Yeah.
And he plays this scene, and he's like, that's what's happening spiritually all around us. And I'm like, all right, we're stopping this. And like, we stop it. I have this awkward conversation, you know, cause
Responsible for
I'm responsible. And mostly
for these kids.
We were the first middle school trip that this like organization had taken in. They had mostly
This
done.
person was with the organization, they're not like a
Yeah,
leader
they were
on
not
the
a leader
trip.
from
They
our
were not.
church. They were with the organization, and typically they were doing this with college students, which is not a lot better, but it's a different context. And I'm like, dude, like we can't do this for middle schoolers.
Yeah.
Like they are emotionally not mature enough. They're not seeing this. You're making them feel shame and guilt that you just asked them to go see things, and now you're like, but there's a whole spiritual world going. And I get underneath what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this is not how we go about this. This is not how we this is going to be traumatizing. I'm going to have all these parents calling me. Like, first of all, I'm showing a rated R movie. There's death everywhere because it was like the D-Day, like the D-Day scene where there's just like,
my goodness.
I hadn't even seen it. So like, I'm like, okay.
Body
So
parts
that's the
flying and everything.
And then he just equates, and I'm like,
Yeah.
but that was such a, back to the whole army thing, that was such a picture, I think, oftentimes that we would try to take things from culture and overlap them spiritually and really want to set these intense emotional moments. And they talk a little bit about that, where you don't know how you're responding. You haven't felt this before. And now you're like, but this is spirit. Like, I'm helping my friends die at school in my middle school because I'm not seeing this everywhere. And you start to feel this guilt and shame. And I just remember that moment. And I feel like this camp or a lot of people had that experience, times a lot more when they're actually walking through it. And so,
well, there just seemed, some of the people in the interviews spoke to this, but it's the emotional manipulation was very real and very strong. And I think there was one woman who was talking about how, they were crying almost every night. They'd gather and everyone was crying all the time. And because of all the guilt, and she's looking back on it, she's like, I was 12 or 13. Like I didn't really do anything that bad, but I don't know why I was feeling so much guilt or being kind of manipulated to feel all of this. Like, you're an awful, you're right. We're sinful people, no denying that. But it's just like, to what end were they trying to help these students realize that? And I don't know, but that being said, I mean, it's funny when you encounter people like that in the Christian culture. Sometimes they act like they're the first person to ever discover that concept of spiritual warfare, and they share it in this way that like they're so convicted. And it's like, yeah, we understand it, but it's a 12 and 13-year-old kid who can't comprehend what you're saying right now, and you're traumatizing them for life. Other cultural contexts that came from this, I think that they mentioned in the story was Columbine. I mean, that happened around that time. Cassie Bernal's story where that went, I guess the internet was around, but it felt pre-internet. That was just everyone talking about that. The gunman asked her,
yeah,
do you believe in God or whatever? And then she said yes, and they killed her. I mean, did they address this myth directly in, I mean, I know they talked about it, but I couldn't remember if they directly, okay.
They did.
Yeah. So it's just, that's one of those things where it's like, I don't even know if I knew that didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
Like until I heard that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember obviously Columbine. I mean, you say that to probably anybody in there that grew up in the 90s, early 2000s, and it was culture shaking. Unfortunately, that happens way, way too much now, but it seemed like that. And they talked about it, how that poured more gas on the fire of us versus them, how they were like, and you could be the next martyr, like she was portrayed as a martyr and all that kind of stuff. And they were really trying to say, and this is the most beautiful way that somebody could die. And that's what's going to happen to you. Like, this is what's going to happen if you take a stand for Jesus. Be serious about your faith. Like that pressure to, man, I remember as a kid, like feeling that pressure.
I think it's that pressure to love Jesus that much.
Yeah, running through those. I remember running through a scenario. I remember at my church that we did for Halloween where they were trying to scare the hell out of you, literally. I think that's one of the things they said. And I remember
at the Hell House instead of the haunted house.
Yeah, and I remember being like an actor in this scene where like we would play something like this out.
Yeah,
and they got a real gun and real, blanks.
Oh, wow. That's commitment.
To scare, to scare the crap out of you.
Yeah.
Are you, and I remember being a part of that and just middle school kids and high school kids, not expecting that's about to happen. And then like, are you that sure of your, just
wait, they were pointing the guns at kids walking through, or
like
just
we were in a class. It was like they were acting. We were on on a stage in a school. Guy comes in and he kind of asks, get down, and then like asks one of the people. I mean, it was basically trying to redo this story.
Yeah.
To bring the reality to this is what's coming to our country. This is what's next. Christians are going to be killed. Christians are going to be persecuted. And just that really heightened. I think that, are you in? Or are you out? No living on the fence. Are you walking on the fence? Like all of that kind of culture that I grew up in. And it seemed like this took it to another level even.
And those things create a message. So like you can have like a really like traumatic, shocking experience. But like, Alex, what did that later on, like, as you left that or thought about that, like in later years, what's the, like, there's a message that comes along with you from that. Like what was that for you?
Yeah. I mean, it was like a fear. It was a fear-driven, guilt-driven, performance-based, follow the rules kind of, that's what faith looks like. And so, which is just so anti. I mean, like that's the proof of you following Jesus, that you have to perform in order to get Jesus' approval, rather than like knowing that you have Jesus' approval actually allows you to, that you have the actual Holy Spirit in you, that you don't need, there's not first and second class people with the Holy Spirit. And, there's a lot of other things, but growing up in that, there's just a lot of confusion and a lot of there'd be nights where I'd go to sleep and like just think about all the bad things I had done that day, which bad is, in air quotes, like, but it felt like I killed someone. It felt like, are you going to forgive me? Was this the last straw? Like there was just like, I remember it wasn't until college I had a professor that, I think he wrote a book, something about like, stop reaccepting Jesus. And like, I was that kid. Like I never was sure of where I was, because depending on how good I was that day really made, like, would I die for him today? Would someone walk, and having that kind of in the background of your mind. And that's what faith is all about. It was a tough thing that I had to obviously work through a lot in life, especially with the spiritual warfare stuff.
Yeah. So back to even that point, I didn't kind of what I was getting at earlier is, I mean, there was an eyewitness named Emily Wyant hiding next to Cassie who stated that there was no such exchange when she was shot. And then an FBI and a journalist investigations that confirmed the yes moment actually happened with another student named Valine Scherner, I think. And then she survived, so she wasn't actually killed when that exchange happened. But that whole thing lived in infamy. I mean, Cassie's mother wrote a book.
Yeah, I read the book. And I mean, if you're the
I
mom and
remember
that's what
reading
you
the book.
hear,
Yeah, you're gonna.
I'm thinking my kid's a martyr at that point. Mm-hmm. And I want everybody to know. And, so that's.
It's a lot to take in. And I don't know. I don't know how you, I mean, some of that's like, it can be formative to kids, and maybe it puts kids in a place where they do think about something they never thought about. And maybe there is, maybe it's formative in a way that helps them at least build faith that they didn't have. So it's like, I don't think any of us want to just completely discredit how that experience may have formed someone's faith, but it does go to show how people can be manipulated, and probably the takeaways from that manipulation are not really what you want someone who is a healthy, strong Christian to believe or apply to their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would say it's probably in me, like made in the way I do ministry, made me very aware, or maybe even to the other extreme of like, when there's a salvation call, or I spoke at a camp this summer or things like that, to like do all I can to remove every ounce of emotion from it, to suck all of the emotion out of it so that nobody's making like an emotional decision. And the error there might be, yeah, but God created us to be emotional people and emotional beings. And there should be some of that we're listening to. It should lead and it should guide us. We should listen to those emotions. And so I probably try to err because I've seen and maybe even been spiritually manipulated enough in my life that, man, I watch things like this and I'm like, I want no part of that,
Yeah.
But then there's also like, man, am I quelching what the Spirit might be doing, or how the Spirit might be using,
Right.
Someone's emotions or music or whatever in order to get their attention in a new way and stuff like that. And so there's definitely an error that can happen through that, I think.
Yeah. Sorry. I thought you were gonna say something
I
else.
also think that the Cassie Burnell story was added to an arsenal, and I think that's where it became pretty destructive within Teen Mania, and where we see that in this documentary. Like that in itself, maybe we could look at that book and get something out of it, or like hear the truth of the story. But when we have really good things that are added to an arsenal and kind of like weaponized, where you're either like this way or you're the other way, and then you have to be willing to like battle for Jesus, and like there's all these like expectations, then it's like, okay, now what is my faith? And it's like in such a formative time, it just adds it's just like this catalog of one thing after the other that conveniently happened in the late 90s, 2000s, that kind of all feels snowballed together, when it's like maybe individually we could have looked at this and maybe processed it different.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's transition into kind of a reflection on this as a whole. What takeaways did you have from this, good or bad? Were you convinced of everything that they were sharing in the documentary? Were you left asking more questions? I know for me personally, I think I don't know. It's tough because I think it's kind of like a fish story, right? The more you tell it, you kind of embellish a little bit each time. And so I sometimes have a difficult time not just taking this person's experience with a grain of salt. Not to say they're lying about it, but I think just to say that I think sometimes we tend to embellish on our memories, like what we remember, how bad it was, what impact it had on us. And I don't know, I struggle with that a lot, because I think we've all had pretty traumatizing experiences in our own existence, in our own, whether it's our faith journey or our personal lives or whatever that might be. But it's kind of like how we let that change us or how we let that affect us. Not saying that we are in full control of that, but I think when you start to write a narrative that this is who I am or why I am the way I am, it's like, where do you find that balance? And I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm stepping out of bounds there because it's something where I'm speaking into someone else's experience and I'm not necessarily allowed to do that. But I just think when I'm trying to put myself in those shoes if I was sharing from my own heart. But
what would you do as a counselor? How would you judge? This is not counseling, but like
pull the counseling card.
As you're talking about people's trauma and where to where to discover how that trauma shaped them, but not give too much power to it, I guess. Like how do you help people through that?
I think like I have my own like spiritual abuse and trauma that has happened in my own life. And so there were actually parts of this, I would say, if you haven't processed through some of that, and this documentary may trigger some of that or like trigger some memories. And so I was like writing some things to myself of just like reminding myself of truths. And one thing I wrote down as I was watching this is that trauma can occur in Christian context, and healing does not mean that you have to abandon your faith. And I think for a lot of times, like, because after this, along in our culture comes deconstruction and reconstruction, and what does that look like? And so for me, that was a huge truth. Like, I can sit in hurt and there can be trauma, but that doesn't mean that I can't be rerouted in truth and grace and rediscover, like, for myself, like, who Jesus is a part of that. And I think we need to just like pause and almost validate that. And there's a lot of solidarity. Like, we all three maybe didn't experience things that we got out of this documentary in the same ways, but there's solidarity and kind of like how we have looked at the world, or like how this shaped us. And so I think like for me, if I were to sit with someone and just like that trauma of that, it's validating that, even if it's about Jesus.
Yeah, there's one experience I had when I was in a youth camp, and I rallied all of the boys' side of the camp when I was in high school to sneak out at night. I told them, if we all sneak out, they can't stop us. They can't stop all of us. And I convinced them all of this. And so it's late in the middle of the night, and we all just start walking across the field to the mess hall. And then, of course, like overzealous security volunteers are out there shining flashlights and chasing us down, and we scattered like cockroaches, and we're hiding all over from these security people. And later it was found that the girls' side did it too, and so we were all organized criminals at this youth camp. The next morning, one of the leaders got up and gave this just overzealous speech about how that night he walked into kind of the main hall area, and he could smell like a candle had been blown out. And in us doing that, we had blown out the Spirit of God that was in that room, in that place, because we had done something so terrible. And I mean, the guilt that cast over all these kids, like, what did we do? What did we do? And it wasn't until after the camp that later I had heard one of the women who were organizing the camp, the theme that year was Wild West. And earlier that night, she had been in the kitchen burning the edges of these wanted posters so that they had like an authentic look. So he did smell something that was burning. But it wasn't that. It's just interesting. It was one of those examples I just held forever, because I'm like, people sometimes tend to power trip on authority, no matter where they're given it, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in the church. And I think the only takeaway I could really lock into when I walk away from this documentary was a testament to how good the faith communities and churches are at building community, locking arm with people, building relationships. And the trauma that I think they're really experiencing that they weren't quite able to verbalize is losing that. Like, because when I go back to that camp, I don't even remember who those leaders were. I remember the friends I made. I remember the people I was experiencing those things with. And so I look at this and you can kind of see that glimmer of like, oh yeah, I remember when that happened, you know? And it's like you're building this community with people. And so really, I think that's what's so detrimental is they lost that. They lost this connection that they had with friends and people that they had built a relationship with. And they're blaming this organization. And I'm not saying that the organization is without fault. It is. But I think it just shows that, like, yeah, churches are a place where people can build bonds. And if the wrong people are leading it, it can lead to stuff like this, where it can be destructive. It can cause trauma. It can leave a bad taste in people's mouth. But I think ultimately it's a bigger testament to losing relationships and losing those people that you went through that with.
And then ultimately it's you experience that separation from God too. Or it's like, oh,
Yeah,
look at
because
your
of it.
family members that don't know Jesus. Like they could not be with you in heaven. They could be burning in hell or whatever
Yeah.
they would choose to say in that.
I think it all ties to the church hurt narrative. You know, people say, and I think that's where it's messy because someone's church hurt is, oh, they didn't let me sing on Sunday, or they didn't let me teach the Bible study to the kids in the children's ministry, and now I'm hurt and I'm traumatized. And it's like, okay, grow up. Or then it's like, no, I was spiritually manipulated by a leader, and it's like, okay, well, that's serious. You know, so it's just where do we draw the line at some of that?
Yeah, I think for me the two takeaways, you know, that I had were, man, when you are a part of an authoritarian type of church, when, you know, a leader is above reproach and above questioning, and when you are this authority king figure on an island, that's a dangerous place. Like if you're in a church like that or an organization like that where there's no accountability, to question a leader is out of bounds, man, that's just not a good place to be, because it's going to breed all of this sorts of stuff. And then that's just not how Jesus seemed to have led. And the other part was, and I think it was one of the things that became the most freeing for me, and was realizing in this whole spiritual warfare thing, like even yesterday in the app, we were reading, you know, through Ephesians 6 and, you know, putting on the armor of Christ. And I remember reading that because I need to put this on to go to war with culture, and realizing that culture is not the enemy. Like we have our sights set so often on the wrong enemy. The enemy is not culture. The enemy is the enemy. It's Satan.
Yeah.
And he is who our battle is against. It's not a bunch of people that he's adopted as his minions that are running around doing evil for him. And we like label all these people as evil people, and they're doing the devil's work. And whether it's Democrats or Republicans or Christians or non-Christians, that's not the enemy. People that are maybe following him or maybe have bought in lies or are selling those lies, they are victims of this enemy. Yeah. And our job is not to go shoot them. Our job is to go rescue them. Like our job is to go help these people discover that there's real hope and there's real freedom and there's real joy found in that. And so I think for me, it was just another reminder of that truth that, man, the Lord's army, we're not fighting flesh and blood. That your boss or even the pastor or the person that hurt you, they might have hurt you, and that might be true. And they might be doing really bad things, and they might even declare that they're following Satan. But that person, as bad as they are, they are not the enemy. They've been deceived by the enemy. They're a victim, and they're perpetrated on, and they have their own wounds. And I'm not saying that means that you just say, "Oh, okay, then everything they did was okay."
Yeah,
that's not at all what I'm trying to say. But just seeing it in that light and that culture, and it's not a culture war, but there's a real, and I think that's what he wants us to do, is take shots at people that aren't actually the enemy, to get our eyes fixed not on his kingdom that he's building, but on culture, because then it just creates a bunch of noise, and it creates a powerless, weak church that's focused on fighting the wrong fight. And so That it was just another reminder of that for me. And I remember just kind of discovering that in Bible college and remembering those truths. And that's been one of those things that was really a turning point for me in my walk with Jesus and this whole culture war type of thing that we always have.
Yeah.
And
sure.
I'll also say that it was, I had a lot of respect, and I'm not saying I don't, for the people that came on and shared their stories. I think they were genuine. They were honest. They didn't take personal attacks, it seemed like, at Ron. You know, they were talking about their experiences and not discrediting anybody who had positive experiences, because there's hundreds of people that had positive experiences. But then, like, it just took this really sharp left turn that was like politics, you know, at the end of it. Like, that it just ended on this like weird political agenda and all this weird thing. I've been a Christian forever. I'd never heard of that.
Setting up
like
a season 3 of some kind.
Whatever, the house state thing. Like I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
Before.
Well, then they kind of hinted that Ron Luce was on the loose again. Yeah. Like he's overseas rallying his troops.
Yeah. I sent him an email. So
we'll see if Ron will get on the podcast. Okay. Jess, did you have any kind of parting thoughts with this?
I also think that one thing we didn't even touch on that I don't even think the documentary touched on, but even like during this time, like mental health was not valued. And that was something that you could pray away. And so I feel like if anyone experienced any kind of, and we didn't even necessarily touch on purity culture, which I know we want to in a future episode, that is such a part of this. And it was such a pivotal part of like who we were, but there's so much to unpack. And so I think it was really good for me, even as someone that like was affected by purity culture and maybe not prioritizing mental health. Like I went into college in 2004 or 5, and it was like, why are you doing psychology? Like what a joke. And like feeling like there, and still just feeling the ripple effects of that, where it's like, you should be able to pray this away or anything like that. And so I think that there's a lot that you can take this with a grain of salt, but also it was healing to kind of go back, and a little bit triggering for what I went through. But it was really good to have, I mean, Joshua Harris is in the documentary talking about how I kissed dating goodbye, and even hearing somebody say like, I made a mistake, and some apologies in there was really good. And so I think it's worth going back listening to, and would love to hear other people's thoughts.
Yeah. All right. I'm sure there's a lot more we could cover. It was an interesting time to experience. And I'm grateful that, I don't know, I think of my own kids, and I'm just grateful that they're able to experience, and that we're never perfect in the way we represent Jesus, because we are, in a fallen world. But I'm glad that they are maybe not a part of this culture or this time of church culture. All right. Well, thanks everybody. It's been good to get back in the podcast seat. Thanks everyone for listening, wherever you may be out there in this big world. And I got to remember how to close this show. It's been so long.
Got it, Eric.
No, but thank you. If you have any questions or concerns, you can always send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org, or you can reach out to us on Instagram and TikTok @CCCOMA podcast, or leave us a voicemail. We need some voicemails. This is the rallying call for voicemails. Send us just everybody call. Maybe you're in the drive-through and you're waiting on your nuggets and you need to leave a voicemail. Maybe you're in like an awkward social situation that you want to get out of and you want to pretend to get a phone call. Just call us and leave a voicemail. Tell us what's going on.
Like when you're walking through Costco and the T-Mobile guys.
Yeah. Pick up your phone and call, leave us a message. Maybe you got a really good would you rather question you want us to answer. But yeah, call us at 402-885-9930. 402-885-9930. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.